Hello and welcome to the first episodes of the Sculptsters. We're three gentlemen who have been sculpting miniatures for many years professionally, and we have been decided that we wanted to get together and kind of chat about it, share our experiences and knowledge with you. So today we have myself, Tom Mason. We also have Bill Thornhill and Patrick Keith.
Hey.
So, yeah.
Well, here we are.
Here we are. This is our first
You're gonna have
episode.
to bear with us, folks, because this is our first run.
Yeah, this is our first run. So,
First run.
yeah, this is actually what's making it difficult. We actually recorded this before, but I forgot to turn on recording of all audio, so we lost a really great episode with a really great intro. It was so natural and just flowed into everything. And now can't think of anything but how much I messed up. So, anyways, but today, go ahead.
Isn't everything better the second time around anyway? I don't know.
That's what they say.
So my wife tells me.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right. Always the second one.
Oh my goodness. Well,
it's going to be one of those kind of shows.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. Well, what we want to do here in the future, especially, is we want to talk about different things that have to do with sculpting and miniatures industry, the ways we go about making figures, struggles we have, and things like that. But for this first episode, we wanted to start by just kind of doing an introduction, telling you a little bit about ourselves, in case you aren't familiar with us. And so I think that's what we'll do.
Why don't you go first?
Okay, sure. All right. Well,
yeah, Tom.
I'm Tom
Tell us
Mason.
how you got into sculpting and gaming and miniatures and whatnot.
I'm Tom Mason. I've been sculpting miniatures professionally since about 2002, or I've been sculpting since 2002. I think my first commission might have actually been 2003. But my love of miniatures goes back way, way, way before that. I first picked up a box of BattleTech, which was probably my first miniatures game. It wasn't what got me into miniatures, though. That was HeroQuest. When I found HeroQuest and started playing with that, and I found the little pull-out pamphlet from Games Workshop that described the greater world that they were selling and creating, that's what really sold me on miniatures. And I haven't really looked back since then. But it was many years before I actually sculpted. So, played lots of Warhammer, lots of 40K, but it wasn't until my sophomore year of college that I decided I needed to sculpt a miniature. So I broke out some Super Sculpey. It was going to be a dwarf. I wanted to make my own dwarf hero, or at least warrior. Wasn't sure how fancy it would get. And I put them on a square base, put a blob of clay there, just pushed on some feet. Back then they were those kind of ball dwarves where they were like a body with a little bit of a head and two little feet sticking out. So it should have been pretty easy, but I didn't do any armature or anything. I didn't know about it, didn't think about it, because up until that point I had just done kind of that polymer clay building where you just roll up a sausage for the leg or the arm, and you just keep sticking it on, things like that. And it didn't work at all. It was too big, and things rolled off because I didn't know about creating little slurries and slip, things like that to help adhere them together, blending, any of that stuff. And I was frustrated. But fortunately, not long after that, I spoke with one of my good friends and mentors in the game industry who owned the hobby store I used to go to in high school, Greg Faberg, and he told me about green stuff and that's what they were using. And it's this amazing material and it can be molded without any issues. And so I tracked, he might have even actually given me my first strip of that. So I whipped it up and sculpted my first little character that summer, little goblinoid character. And it wasn't amazing, but I made an armature. I stuck putty on it. It had a form, it had musculature, and it was a pretty good first start. From there, I went and sculpted a dwarf again. Finally, it was very much out of scale, very, very different proportions than the Games Workshop dwarves at the time. I'm not sure what I was going for. I think I was just trying to sculpt something, and even though I'm sure I would have liked for it to be in scale with something that I was using. He kind of looks almost like a little human with a beard. He's actually pretty tall, except for being so small. But that one was head over heels better than my first. And so from there, I found the One List Sculpting group. That's actually where I picked up a lot of my tips on tools and how to work with the material. And yeah, so people also would post jobs there from time to time. And I got my first gig there when Troy Megley from Fantasy West, which is a little company that he was going to do these collectible dragons. And he posted up a job, and I reached out to him right away, and he saw my two little miniatures that I'd ever done and said, "Yeah, sure, you could probably do this."
You can take this big dragon
Yeah.
on.
Fortunately, it was pretty small. I mean, still bigger than, miniatures I was doing, but not like, things Reaper does nowadays where they're, at least a foot tall and crazy stuff like that. But anyways, it was still a challenge, big challenge. It was all green stuff, lots of build up. And but I did it. I got it done, and I haven't looked back since then. So yeah.
That's cool. What do you think is your most fun job you've ever done?
Most fun job I've ever done. Well, that'd have to be Mercs, I have to say.
Yeah.
Working with my buddy Keith and getting to collaborate so closely on sculptures and everything. There's been a lot of great opportunities working with other companies and other designs, but there was nothing like that where I had a lot more involvement in the creation and collaboration. So.
And that was where we first met, wasn't it? On the Merc.
That's right. Yeah. Was that your first Adepticon as well?
That was my first Adepticon. Yeah. So I was kind of in awe of everything that was going on.
Yep.
And I saw the excuse me. I saw the Merc stuff, and I thought, wow, that's just amazing. Mainly because I can't sculpt straight line stuff to save my life, or I can, but I just hate it so much. I've it all my life. So.
Yeah, it's hard. It takes some time.
That was really good stuff.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the Merc stuff was really, really cool looking. I think I met Keith at Gen Con, like the first year that Mercs had its little booth there, and they had like these big banners with like all of his art on it and stuff. And there was like a little clear, display case with like all of the painted minis or something in it, and they were just amazing little soldier eyes. I think did Bobby one of those? I think there was like one or two
back
things
then,
that he did, but
back then it would have been all me, and I think Bobby would have done one or two of the squads by that point.
But all the rest of them, and I was just the aesthetic of the kind of the near future sci-fi kind of design of it. It looked really cool, and
it was very different, wasn't it, at that time?
Well, we were trying to go for, like, Keith always drew so dynamically and with so much energy, and I was just I was dying to sculpt that way. I always like to have a lot of movement in my pieces. That was before I started painting a lot more miniatures and realized, oh man, it's kind of a pain to put together these multi-part guys that are going this way or that. It costs so much more money to mold them and everything. But it was a great challenge, and it taught me so much about sculpting. But we loved the Infinity stuff that was coming out. But Keith had this really great aesthetic going on where I guess we used to say more of an American style versus their Spanish influenced by anime. We were kind of pulling it a little more industrial with what we were doing. So
yeah, it's a little more of the gritty side,
gritty, but still with all that, trying to capture that same dynamism. Dynamism.
Yeah. If even that's a thing. Yeah.
Funny thing though about Adepticon, so that's where I first met Bill. I had met you a lot. I think you were there too, Patrick, but I had actually met you many years before, which I'm sure we'll get into. But I picked up some of Bill's sculpts, some of his Footsore Dark Age guys, and I also got a Kenku samurai bird warrior that you had done for Bill.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh yes. Yeah, I remember. Yeah, the
Tengu.
Tengu that we did. Yeah. Don Hauser now has them from Wee Wolf Miniatures.
Oh, good. I'm glad
Yeah.
they're still around.
They were cool figures. Really
I
nice.
sculpted some of those birds, the Corvus, the Corvi.
You did them all, yeah.
Yeah, I did
Great.
some of
Yeah.
those, and
They were
some flying baboon, like winged baboons for that.
yes. Oh, they were
Yeah,
outstanding. Then.
thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks.
And I molded them.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah, I remember sending those to you. Yeah, to make the molds. Yep.
Yeah. But yeah, they were that was a great set.
Yes. Very nice. Well,
So what have you been
what have I been doing lately? Well, I finished up the Gnome Guard Kickstarter not too long ago. Basically all fulfilled. I actually just saw pictures, and you know what? I might post them on the stream here, or on our hangout here in post. I just got pictures of the painted ones somewhere around here of that Mike Cousins did for the Gnome Guard.
Yeah.
So I'm very excited about that. So he got them done right before Adepticon. So I told him he didn't have to. I knew he's probably got a lot going on, getting ready to travel, and he's teaching classes and whatnot. And this actually might go up right before Adepticon. So if anybody's watching this and they're at Adepticon, they should definitely go check out his classes, or at least see what he's up to. He's a great guy, amazing painter. So
yeah, the little goblins that he painted for you look really awesome.
I absolutely love those. Absolutely love those. So,
and Adepticon's a great place to meet people. Full stop, isn't it? It's one of those shows that you see a lot of faces at. You know. It's
very friendly to the hobbies as well. You know, a lot of instructors there teaching sculpting and painting, and then they've got that great hobby zone where you can just free paints everywhere you sit down and just start painting with everybody who's getting their competition pieces ready. It's a great atmosphere.
Yeah, it is, really is. Probably
I guess we should do this PSA real quick, and unfortunately, all three of us won't make it there this year, but I will be there next year for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, anyways,
it's a shame.
But
I would like to go again. That's one of my favorite shows. Unfortunately for us, trying to get all of our stuff packed up and all the way to Chicago
is drive for you.
That's very challenging for us to get all the stuff there. So I'm trying to figure out between now and next year, because this year we're doing the fulfillment on the Scoutship Kickstarter thing. So we're like, well, we're just powering through trying to get the rest of that stuff done. So we're not really doing anything and we've got some other shows coming up later in the year, but we'll talk about that in another segment. But yeah, we should definitely try to figure out a way that we can all get to Adepticon again and hang out and do stuff.
Yeah.
So for sure.
Definitely. And we always eat well.
Oh yeah. Yeah, there's some really great stuff to eat there. Yeah.
Yeah. We'll definitely do it again.
I'm currently just before I wrap up my part, am currently working on the next release for, I don't know what I'm calling my world. Originally it was the Adventures of Little Knife and Cronin world, but it's definitely been taken over more by the goblins and the gnomes and that kind of cute little underbelly of troubling, menacing society. But yeah, so I don't want to say too much about it, but I am working up the concepts for that and should be sculpting on that very soon.
Oh, very cool.
That will be another Kickstarter, yes. It will kind of continue to expand the world with few more unique denizens. So you might have actually seen one of them before in my first set, that Adventures of Little Knife and Cronin. So that'll be the hint. I'm sure it's not too hard to guess, but we'll see if anybody realizes what it is. And see if anyone put it down below if you think you know what it's going to be. I'll tell you if you're right. Cool. All right. Well, Bill, you want to go next?
Sure, yeah. So where do I start? I think the first miniature that I ever came across on it's like a flea market, and it was a Citadel Miniatures cave troll, and it was on a hard base, so it's not something that you could probably find anymore. And it was proper lead, because it was like bent really easily, and the axe eventually fell off before I could paint it. Well, I actually didn't know you painted it. I wasn't aware of the hobby in any way, shape, or form. I just saw it and thought that looks cool, so I bought it for a few pence at the time, and I had that for years and years. But God does what He wants.
No,
But
you
it
didn't do
never did.
anything. It's this dumb technical difficulty we were having with the camera.
Go on, Tom. Keep it together.
I'm sorry, I'm
Let's be
breaking.
fresh today.
It keeps
We don't know why.
popping in and out.
We don't know why, but it
Well,
keeps zooming in and out of Patrick. Okay.
I don't know what's going on with the camera.
I'm sure it's my end. We'll figure it out next time. We just got to get this done. So, all right, go ahead, Bill. Cave Troll, Citadel.
Patrick
I'm
just zooms in on himself. He likes everyone to see him.
I feel like
But he's always quite small. So yeah, that was the first miniature I came across. And then I joined the army. I originally wanted to be an illustrator because that was my life was Lord of the Rings and fantasy books, Lost Realms, and all that kind of stuff. So, and I was always enamored with the artwork, and we were a very affluent family, so it was easy to give me a paper and a pencil, and I could just draw. And so that's what I spent most of my teenage years just doing. And being the sensitive, artistic type, I then eventually joined the army, and at 19, and I went through that, and I got posted to Germany, and the guy who I shared the room with went on leave, and he left at the end of his bed a copy of Warhammer 40k Rogue Trader, the original rule set. And I was bored one day, and I was like, "Oh, what's this?" Started flicking through it, and I was hooked. I wasn't aware of wargaming in any way, shape, or form, and I was like, "This is fantastic." It's like the best thing since sliced bread. So I was going on leave a couple of weeks later, and I went on leave, and there was a games workshop in Manchester where I'm from, and I spent about £85, which back then was a lot of money. Yes, I am that old. But I got Space Marines, I got Orcs, I got Wood Elves, because I had no idea that you couldn't mix the two, and what the hell, some monsters and stuff like that, and a big pile of paints. And I went back, and that was me hooked from then on. Much to my ex's dismay at the time, because I'd spend all my spare time just painting these things, and she had no idea why. So I set up a games club in Munster where I was posted, and I put a notice on the NAFI, which is like the American TX. Put it on a notice board that if anyone games out there, give me a call. And I'd managed to get the quartermaster to give me a room underneath the cookhouse where I could set up some tables and play games. And I'd set up, I think, 3 tables. I thought maybe someone will turn up. 31 people.
Wow.
And I was like, wow.
Nice.
And it's just like all these people that have been, gamers forever, and I'm just kind of this new on the block kind of thing, just starting this club up. The first person that contacted me actually was a captain in the Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers, and I stayed friends with him for a long, long time. He lives up in Scotland now. But yeah, from then on, I was building armies right the way throughout my army career. And then when I left, I went into IT, which was a mistake because I don't like IT. But I thought it'd pay well, so
Yeah.
But my ex got injured in a bus crash. Not badly, but badly enough that I couldn't stay in the job, and I was kind of relieved, really. But at that time, I'd started painting professionally for people. And so I reached out to War Games Foundry and said, would you like to, anything painted? So they sent me some figures, and some of the figures were 7 Years' War Prussians. And Brian Ansell actually phoned me, which was I was a bit starstruck, obviously. And he was very insistent that the Prussian blue had to be a certain shade. And he said, phone this guy. He's got one of Kev Dallymore's, who's a well-known painter over in the UK. He's got one of Kev Dallymore's Prussians. He'll send it down to you. Give me your address. He'll send it down to you, and then copy that shade of blue. Because apparently normal Prussian blue doesn't hold up under photography; it just turns black. So I give this bloke a call, and his name was Nick Collier. And Nick Collier was one of the sculptors for War Games Foundry at the time, and really nice guy, and we chatted for quite a bit. And I said, oh, I've always loved the idea of sculpting. And he says, well, it's not that hard. He said, I'm on vacation down in Wales next weekend. If you want, pop by and, I'll show you a few trips and tips. And I was like, wow, that was like the best thing. So I travelled right up from one end of Wales to the other to go visit him. And he worked even when he was on vacation. He had a little sculpting set up on one of the tables in the cottage where he was, and kind of took breaks to take his wife and son out. But other than that, he was sculpting away. So he showed me how to move green stuff around, which I'd had no joy with at all. I hated it, but I didn't understand the concept of how you use it. And as soon as I saw him just pushing, pulling, push, as soon as I saw that, the light bulb went on in my head. I was like, oh, that's how it's done. And I was kind of hooked then, and he, gave me a few things to practice on. And then a couple of weeks later, he invited me up to Newcastle where he lived and said, come up for a weekend. He said, I'll show you, even more stuff. And I was like, wow, this is, I totally started. This was like fantastic. So I went up there, and he basically put me through like a sculpting boot camp. And I hardly slept all weekend. I arrived there on the Friday. We went straight up to his little workroom with a cup of tea, and he started showing me stuff. And we worked till 2 a.m. on he showed me how to build dolls and how to make faces and build arms onto existing dolls, that kind of thing. And the whole weekend it was just that, and he made me just go through it all. I made a couple of World War II figures he was working on for another company called Harlequin at the time. I think Harlequin. They're Black Tree now, I think. But I think it was still Harlequin at the time. And anyway, I made a Russian commissar and an American advancing forward with a Garand. And he slipped them into his workload for the month. Just to see if anyone noticed, and nobody noticed the difference, which was like a massive buzz for me. They weren't complete figures. They were just, I was basically putting arms and adjusting heads and maybe moving legs, but the bulk of it was done. But even so, it was like, that was a really big buzz. So from then on, I just started practicing sculpting. And then a ad came up for a trainee sculptor for War Games Foundry. I was like, well, I know people at War Games Foundry, so I'll apply. So I did a from scratch. I did a Fagin figure running down the street with his bag of swag, and I didn't get the job, but Brian Ansell said, if you want, come up and be the master mold maker for a year, and then after that, you'll be the next trainee sculptor we take on. I was like, deal, and I turned around to the wife and I said, we're going. And she was like, what? Said, yeah, we're moving, let's go. So we moved up to Newark, and I started there. And that was actually the best thing that happened, because I learned the whole production process, which you can't really learn anywhere else unless you're actually in there doing the job. It's not like there's classes for it, I'm all making it, that kind of thing. So it's actually the best thing that happened to me. I eventually left about a year later before I took up, and that's a whole story in itself. But then I went back to Wales, and I bought a casting machine and a vulcanizer and a melting pot, and I thought, I'm going to just do contract mold making for people. So I did that for a while, and then I started messing around and making my own figures. And another friend called Keith, and I can't for the life of me now remember his company, but he made handmade scenery of just incredible quality. He offered to take some of these figures that I'd made to Salute that year and see if we could sell them. And I'd made, I'll put it up on the screen now, or Tom will, these Arabs. And I made the Arabs because I was playing Warhammer Ancient Battles at the time. And I wasn't happy with any Arab figures that were out there, so I thought, I'll make them. So he took them to Salute, and I saw him at the end of Salute. I said, did we sell any? And he said, yes, 100, and it handed me over 180 quid, and I was like,
Wow.
wow, I can earn money from
Mhm.
this, you know. And so that was it. Then I started a company called Musketeer Miniatures, and we do Great Northern War. We did the the British Civil War, or the Very British Civil War, it's actually called. And we did some with the Arab range, and we did a couple of others that I can't remember now. It's too good. But that went on for a while, and then I met my wife, the current Mrs. Thornhill, via Facebook, of all things, and moved out here to America. And I started up Futsal Miniatures with my friend Don Hauser. And we grew that along with the Musketeer range that was still there, and we added lots more ranges, and we basically became known for all the Dark Age figures that we did. And the real reason why I invested in the Dark Ages is because I didn't have to make guns, and I didn't have to make vehicles or anything like that, because I hate straight line sculpting. I just detest it with a passion. Maybe because it just takes so damn long. So yeah, we grew that, and then Musketeer was actually then moved back to the UK, and is now run by two guys, Mark Farr and Andy.
Update.
Oh, my memory's going terribly, and he's
Andy
a really good mate. don't be watching this, Andy. But they run Futsal Miniatures now, and they've added loads of ranges to it, and they've got a couple of Kickstarters happening as well. So go and check them out. And then I kind of had a 2-year sabbatical because I was kind of burnt out with sculpting. I really kind of reached my limit. I didn't want to touch putty. I actually got all my my half-finished miniatures and all my sculpting gear.
Still can't believe you did that.
I was done. I was done. I was just hit maximum burnout, and I just didn't want to touch it at all. But I started playing around with ZBrush and really kind of fell in love with miniature making again. It's kind of like the best thing ever, because it was like, I don't know how can you say, it was because the process is so different, and you can build things so much quicker. And straight line is something I love now. It really kind of turned it around for me. So I thought, right, well, I'm gonna work in 3D,
digital,
and so I started up. Digital, yeah, it's digital. I keep getting that wrong. It is digital sculpting. So now I sell STL files of figures on Patreon and Miniature Market, my Miniature Factory rather, for Lost Heresy, which is my little company. And yeah, I'm doing sci-fi and fantasy because I've never ever done it before. I've always done historicals. So that's where I am now.
That's what we forgot to do in the beginning. We introduced ourselves. We forgot to say where you can find us at. So I'm at thetommason.com, and obviously here on YouTube, Tom Mason Sculptor, where you'll see this first episode. Bill, you're on, which you just said, but say it again.
I'm on patreon.com/Lost Heresy.
Patrick, do yours before we... Oh, go ahead.
You can find it on my Miniature Factory as well.
You can just find me either by... I would just recommend going to Google and typing in Sculpt Dude, or you can type in Bombshell Miniatures, and like we're all over the internet. Like we've got Instagram and Facebook, and
Patrick's very good at the social media marketing and actually having a presence out there, unlike Bill and I. We have our small
I'm such a pimp for our own stuff. It's like I'm trying to,
No, that's good. You have to be. You have to be.
Yeah,
you got to feed all those cats you've got, so it's fair enough.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and there's 3 of them now because we just had one that showed up like at the beginning of March, the first weekend of March, and she was like, "Take me in, it's freezing cold out here," and so we did. Yeah, but yeah, no, that's interesting. Well, Bill, you were talking about Footsore, and I did a little bit of sculpting for Footsore, for like some little miniature things, and I think that was the first encounter that I had with you was that you and Don had contacted me about sculpting I guess it was some kind of a. I think she was kind of based on Maleficent. That had she was like
She
winged
was.
figure. Yeah.
She was. And you know, she's never ever been cast.
Oh,
Oh
Or molded.
wow.
She's never
yeah.
molded up. And I've got a feeling, hang on.
How funny.
Because
Okay.
this is totally impromptu, but I've got a feeling she's here. There she is. She's still here in my drawer.
Oh
I
my
don't know whether
gosh. Okay.
that
Oh,
will show up.
That's
wow.
awesome.
That's
But
funny.
this is a kind of it's just such a beautiful sculpt. And it has two wings on her, and the best thing ever. And I was kind of nervous about sculpting it, molding it, in case I damaged the hands. And so I've kind of I have the ADHD, which is treated now, but it wasn't at the time. And I had that mental block that I couldn't put it in a mold because it would just die. So it sat there
Yeah.
for probably about 5 years, 6 years, maybe.
Wow. Well, hey, I'll make a deal with you. If you send it back to me, I'll cast it in resin and send you resin masters.
That sounds good.
So if you want to put it on mold, and then that way it won't destroy the original.
Deal. I'll send it to you.
Yeah, we can do that.
Yeah, but it's a beautiful figure. It's just stunning. I've always been in. I've always had a bit of a sculpted man crush on you, Patrick. Don't like to say, but I did. That's just like the best.
Well,
Let's. I'll photograph this and hopefully Tom will put a picture of it so you can see it properly.
Yeah. Can
Will do.
drop it in where it goes. Yeah. So
By the magic of the internet.
All right.
So what about you, Patrick?
Yeah. How'd you get started?
oh man. Well, I know this is another run through of this from the last time, but I was kind of thinking is like, well, how do I compress like 20 years worth, or even more than that, now 40 years worth of stuff into like 10 minutes. But, as a little kid, when I was going to school, my interest in sculpting, came from like my first day of school or actually the first week, where all the little kids were grabbing their crayons and they would go and draw and color and all of this stuff. And the only thing that was left was like a little bucket of plasticine clay, like that oil-based clay or whatever. So I would grab that and make little dinosaurs and like King Kong and all of this. And the kids would just marvel at it. They were like, how can you make stuff like that? I was like, it's just a thing I do, and it's like, I couldn't have been 5 or 6, and then in 77, I think I was in the 5th grade, Star Wars came out, and that made a huge impact on me because I realized it's like, well, guys could make model spaceships and, and I just marveled at the miniatures and all of that kind of stuff. And I was really, really into that aspect of it. I built model kits, little snap together, like what was the Aurora kits, like all of the dinosaur things from the 70s. I don't know if you remember, like they had the T-Rex and the little cave people and all this. So I'd get those models and build them. I was really, that was my big thing. And so when gaming came along, I guess in the mid 70s, like late 70s, 80s. And once I get to middle school, I discovered Dungeons and Dragons and found that, in a hobby shop. And I think the first miniature that I ever bought was Tom Meyer was sculpted for Raoul Parthen. He did like this little troll guy, and he looked more like a little Spartan thing because he had a spear and this loincloth and kind of a Spartan helmet. And I didn't really think about it at the time of like, well, wow, somebody made this, and I just couldn't figure out how they made it out of metal. And so, then, you fast forward another 20 years, 30 years, or whatever, as I'm gaming through high school and all this. Once I started working for the comic book store, like, after I had gotten out of college, there was a guy that I worked with at the shop that introduced me to, Warhammer, and he was really into 40K and all of that. So he was showing me a lot of the miniatures for 40K and Fantasy Battle. And I thought, oh, this is really amazing. And so the more I kind of got into it, painting and building my own armies and everything, Vicky, who is my wife now, 25 years, actually our anniversary, 26 years will be Friday, the 25th of March. Yeah.
Congratulations.
So Yeah, so we're gonna take a day off and go get something to eat or whatever. But before we got married, she was a customer of mine at the comic book store, and she would come in and buy D&D stuff and figures and all of this. And then once I had introduced her to our group and playing Warhammer and stuff, she'd gravitate towards the Tyranids and the Skaven, and would just really, was all out on that, and would just kick our ass and, and win trophies and things. So we were like, okay, we don't want to play with you anymore. But before it got to that point, she was like wanting to pay me to paint her models for her, to paint her Skaven. And I said, well, I could paint them for you, but it would be better if I showed you how to paint them, and then you could just paint them yourself. So we did that. And by the time that she got finished with her Tyranid army, which is like, it's got to be like 4,000 or 5,000 points worth of Tyranids now. You couldn't tell had painted and which ones that she had painted. She had just leveled up. So we went and played tournaments and things. And there was a tournament out by the DFW airport that we had gone to one weekend, and the Reaper guys were there. And the general manager for our comic book store was like, she had seen the stuff that I had done, because I had sculpted, I had done model conversions, and then I had sculpted some stuff out of Milliput and some things. And so she was like, hey, I want to introduce you to these guys that are like making miniatures. And it was the Reaper guys. It was Ed and Dave. And I was already familiar with their minis and stuff, because we had stocked them the very first line. I think it was like the first release that they had done of like 18 miniatures for the Dark Heaven Legends stuff. And we had stocked those in the store. So I was like, oh, I know Reaper miniatures, that's the stuff that we had just, put in the store. So, so I went and got my little sculpts, and I showed them to them. And then they invited me to come out to the shop. And this was when they were in Louisville, before they moved to the location that they're at now with the big factory. And so they were like, well, hey, you clearly, why did you sculpt this out of Milliput? And I was like, well, I don't know what else that I can sculpt it out of. It's, this was what I had. And so they were like, well, if you want to have it cast or whatever, it's better to sculpt it out of green stuff. And if you come out, we can kind of show you some stuff. So I had made up an appointment to go out and kind of visit the shop and do a little tour. And they were in this little strip center with like this transmission shop at like one end or whatever, like car stuff. And then they were at the other end of this little cramped area. And so we go in, and it's like 2 spin casters in there and like a bunch of computers crammed over in the corner. So it was like, okay, well, this is Reaper miniatures. How cool. What was really funny about that was, though, I saw one of my other customers working there, and I was like, hey, there's that guy that's been coming into the store all the time. And that turned out to be Ron Hawkins. And so, Ron is now the art director,
What was he doing back then?
I think he was just like, shop gopher or whatever, because he was still in school or was in college or something, or just out of college or whatever. But I remembered, I recognized him as one of my customers, because he would come in and we would talk about painting miniatures and stuff. So, so then they gave me this green stuff, and I went and took it back and messed with it. And the first thing that I did with it was this crappy little fox character and whatever. And Tom's got a picture of that he could put up on the screen. That's the very first sculpt that I did with green stuff. And then I took it back out and had him cast it, even though it was awful or whatever. And I just couldn't really figure out how to get the material to work. So I kind of left off on that, after a while of like, there was no internet. There was no really way this was, I want to say it was 97 or something, somewhere around there. So there wasn't really any information, and I didn't know about like one list sculpting until like later. And I don't even know if it, had started up until after that. But, so then I just went back to 2D art, and I had taken my art stuff to Gen Con. I had done paintings for Fantasy Flight Games. I did a bunch of cards for the first series of the Game of Thrones cards, and a bunch of covers for Earth Dawn role-playing game and that type of stuff. And I was doing digital art for that. So I went to the art show, and then at Gen Con, Ron and the entourage came by at the art show, and he was like, "Hey, I hadn't seen you in a while. You know, what's going on, and what are you doing here?" And so he talked a little bit, and he asked me if I had been doing any more sculpting, and I said, "No, not really. I kind of left off on that." So it kind of made sort of an impact for me that he had asked about it. And so when I went home, I thought, well, maybe I ought to dig out that green stuff and see if I can give that another shot, because I really like sculpting. You know, it's a fun process for me, and it's a lot better than you know, trying to do 2D stuff, which there was a lot of competition for. And I never got to that Dragon magazine cover level that I wanted to get to. So
Me either.
yeah, yeah. So I just found working with 3D material, you know, a lot more intuitive. So, and I guess that goes back to, you know, elementary school or whatever. But anyway, so I thought, well, I'll give it a shot. And so then the next thing that I did was I did that little pirate girl, and I thought, wow, this is a lot better than the last thing that I did. So I could see that it's like, well, I just need to kind of focus a little bit more on, you know, the material and kind of get an idea of, you know, how it works. So the I was looking, and by this time now there was the internet, so I was able to look online and check out Reaper, and they were having Reaper Artists Conference, and they were offering sculpting classes by all of the folks that do the professional sculpting. So I thought, oh, well, I'm going to sign up for some classes, and I'll go, and maybe these people can tell me, you know, what I'm missing as far as like working the green stuff and all that. So in between when I had signed up for the classes and when the actual show was, I sculpted 4 or 5 little things and put them in a box, a little case, and took them as like, okay, well, this is where my skill level is right now. And, you know, where can it go? And one of the classes, when I was coming out of it, Bob Rodolphe looked at my little sculpts and kind of critiqued them. And he told me, he said, well, if you keep doing what you're doing, then I'm going to be out of a job. And so that stuck with me too. I thought, oh, well, maybe I should do this. Maybe this is the thing that I should do. So working at it. And I was also doing IT. Like I went to work for Blockbuster doing their help desk stuff. You know, I did that for like 12 years. And while I was on the night shift, I took my little sculpting kit with me because we were doing phone support. So I would take my calls and log the calls and do all of that stuff. But then I would have all my sculpting stuff off on my desk to the side where I could actually sculpt while I was talking on the phone. And so it was kind of double duty in a way where, you know, they were paying me to learn how to sculpt. So that was kind of a bonus. But then when I started posting my stuff online, you know, I was having Reaper cast some of the things for me, like contract casting, as I would sculpt a few pieces like once a month or whatever. And so I did a bunch of little babes kind of figures. I did a little alien guy and some stuff, and they'd cast them up for me. And then I would just put them on, you know, our webpage to sell them, you know, $5 or whatever. And so I got Jen Haley to paint one of those for me, which is kind of a Deja Thoris or kind of a figure. And then after posting my stuff on the internet, Tom Andrews contacted me to do some work for their Blood Bowl character, for their Blood Bowl figures. They were like conversion kits. So it's like, well, we're going to do arms and legs and helmets and whatever, you know, to convert all kinds of like little chaos guys and all this stuff. So I started doing what I called like semi-pro sculpting, because I wasn't full-time, but I was starting to get, you know, commission work to do some little, you know, characters or add-ons. I did like this little witch sitting on a pumpkin, which was based on some Matt Dixon art. And I did some elves.
I thought you were a pro at that time. You were definitely a pro.
What's that?
You were definitely a pro at that time.
Yeah.
You just weren't doing it full time.
Yeah, I wasn't, but I was still selling stuff. Yeah. So then I kept, you know, pestering Reaper. I was like, well, hey, you know, is there something that, you know, you guys want? You know, let me try something. So I tried a couple of things for them, and then I started, I sold them a first little elf character and then a bunch of other stuff after that. And so I was doing 3 or 4 sculpts a month. And then once the Blockbuster help desk closed down, then they laid us all off. I was like, well, now what am I going to do? So I went to the American Heart Association and did that for about 6 months and quit because it was just starting over, and I wasn't making any money at it, and it was just way too hard, after having, worked somewhere else. So I went to Vicky and I said, look, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to do tech support. I said, if I can get 5 clients that I can get regular work from every month, I can make as much money as I was making at the help desk. And so she said, okay, we'll give it a try, give it a couple of months and see if you can get work. And I did that for 10 years and never had to solicit work from anybody. Mm-hmm. So there was only 1 or 2 months in that period where I had to actually get out there and ask somebody, hey, have you got any work for me? So I always had work booked and all of that. So I did a bunch of stuff for the Pathfinder stuff for Reaper, and let's see, I did a bunch of Chronoscope stuff. And then once I was doing stuff for Reaper, Jim contacted me from Dark Sword Miniatures, and he was like, well, hey, he was actually at ReaperCon and saw some of my stuff. And he said, well, I think you're at the Dark Sword level now where you can start doing some stuff. So I did a test piece for him that's like a little fighter based on some Jeff Easley art, and she's got like a little shield and a sword and a cape, and it's kind of like, well, she's got everything on it that you need to kind of learn how to sculpt. Mm-hmm. There's some armor, there's leather, there's some swords and shields and things like that. So it was kind of a test run. It's like, well, how well can you do this? And so he bought that, and then, it was kind of like the further along that I got, the more I was getting, bigger clients and stuff. And then I started doing stuff for Privateer Press. And so I did several things. I did a couple of big sets for them, and some mainly character models, did some Warcasters and that type of stuff. So, and the crowning achievement for me for the Privateer Press thing that I did was the Druid Gone Wilder. Mm. And that's one of their convention models that they pull out whenever they go to Adepticon or Gen Con or something like that, where it's like, hey, you can get our little collection of convention models. This is the only time you can buy them is during the weekend of the show and all that kind of thing. So I did the little Druid character based on Chris Walton's art. And then I want to say it was Matt DiPietro or Dallas Kemp that painted the studio model of that. Mm. And then I got Meg Maples to paint a copy of it for me. So I have that packed away. And it's like so I have a studio painted model of that that's exactly identical to the one that they have on their website.
Nice.
Yeah, so that was a lot of fun. But that's basically my client work stuff that I did, and that's what set up us being able to start our own Bombshell Miniatures thing, because it was around 2012. We were talking about Kickstarter. I know Tom's Kickstarter for and it was before that you did.
Yeah. It would have been for my my launching of Effigy Miniatures. So I did 2 fantasy figures and then 3 sci-fi girls.
Right. And it was the sci-fi girls, because I backed that Kickstarter and I got those. And I have that little button around here.
Oh, yeah.
That's over on the workbench. Yeah. Yeah. But once, I guess, what Mike McVeigh and Cool Mini or Not did the
Sedition Wars.
Oh, yeah, that was and then once set. Reaper did their Bones thing, then it was kind of like, hey, Kickstarter seems to be this viable platform that miniature customers are going to want to come and buy the stuff. So that was when I started thinking about, because I had done a few sculpts. I did the Sophie on the motorcycle. I sculpted the Sophie part. The motorcycle was a 3D model from somebody else. but they cast one, and then I sculpted her to fit on the motorcycle for the first Bones Kickstarter. And then they had taken some of my other sculpts that I had done for them and converted them into the Bones thing. So I had some of the backers from the Bones Kickstarter that knew my work. And so I was like, well, I've got an audience for, my own stuff. So if I'm going to launch a Kickstarter project and kind of do my own thing, this is the time to do that. And I had already been looking at, like hassle-free miniatures, like Kev White was doing. And I was looking at the Raging Heroes stuff at like their digital things, and I was amazed by that. So we launched the Bombshell, the first Babes Kickstarter in 2012, and we funded that. I think there was like 1,100 backers on that, and we raised 140,000 for the first one.
That's pretty impressive.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
the first one.
Well, I was amazed, and we got away with doing it with just concept art. Like I didn't do any of the sculpts. I basically just showed pictures of like, well, here's the stuff I've sculpted for other people, and then here are the things that I want to do. And so I licensed like 5 pieces of art from Matt Dixon, and then we had I had Izzy Collier design some stuff for us, and then I had a couple of other concept artists that I knew that was like I paid them to design some things for us. And so basically I just put the pictures up and I said, I want to make a miniature of this, and if you give me $5,000, I'll make it and cast it and send it to you. So it's like we started out with 3 figures, and then everything after that was a stretch goal.
Mm-hmm.
So we stretched it all the way up to that amount. You could run a Kickstarter like that nowadays because everybody wants a finished. I want to see a painted miniature.
They want to see what you're doing. Yeah.
Yeah.
You might get away with it like the last 2 stretch goals. Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because there's already a proof of concept that they're looking at, on the thing. It's like, oh, okay, well, yeah, these last 2 things. It's like, yeah, you're going to make this, but you couldn't run a whole Kickstarter that way. So, but that was back, like right at the first of the thing. And so, like in the last 10 years, that's changed a lot. But it got us launched, and we've run like 7 or 8 Kickstarters since then for various things. And so, it's allowed us to kind of be independent, Vicki and I, from having to rely on client work. But that's kind of the key to doing any kind of successful, Kickstarter or Patreon or anything. It's like, you hear you got to pay your dues and all this kind of stuff. And that's really what that is. Paying your dues is like, I'm doing work for other people to put me into a position to where I can do my own work. And I've built an audience, based on that. Because you can go out and look at like a lot of these like Disney artists and stuff, and you go like, well, who are these people? Why do they have like thousands and thousands of followers on, Instagram and Facebook and whatnot? And it's like, well, because they've done animation work for Disney. They've done backgrounds or character designs or whatever. And they've already have a built-in audience that they take with them out into their own, when they brand themselves, as an artist.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I tried to do. I tried to look at all of the things that I did before as a stepping stone to being an independent artist, where I've got my own brand of stuff. And so I looked at a lot of other folks that were doing that type of thing, like Kev White was doing. Trey Manor with Redbox Games, did that. He branded his own stuff, and it's very distinct, because when you look at the picture online, even though Trey has transitioned from sculpting in green stuff and polymer clay and whatnot, when you look at his digital sculpts now, it's like that Trey Manor sculpted that. It carries over.
Very distinct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's
so what you're working on at the moment.
That's me chatting about, my experience.
What are you doing now?
Yeah, what are you working on right now?
Well, right now, I'm mainly buried under trying to get the last bit of this Kickstarter fulfillment done. But in the side, aside to that, I'm doing some new character sculpts and some pieces for our Kickstarter thing that we're planning to do next, which is the role-playing game for our Counterblast setting. So
Awesome.
we had submitted some stuff last summer to
That'd be cool.
Pinnacle Entertainment for the Savage Worlds role-playing game, and they have like a little third-party, I guess, associates thing where it's like, well, we can publish stuff using their rules, with our own setting and all of that. So we got approved for, producing our own gaming materials based on the Savage Worlds game. So now we're converting our our Counterblast stuff over to do that. And so I'm doing a bunch of new sculpts. I'm trying to finish up some of the sculpts from the miniature battle game that we did to kind of fill out some of those lines. And then, we're going to do a bunch of new character models and sort of iconic things and some aliens and stuff like that.
Awesome.
So that's what's coming down the line, as far as that goes. The client work, I hardly do any of that anymore, but I did the Adepticon piece for Victoria Miniatures.
Awesome.
So the last one that I did was Sister Joan, where she's kind of walking. She's kind of got like a Mandalorian pose where she's sort of walking towards camera, that kind of look. But this one is more of it's a different pose. And when she posts pictures of it, I'm sure next week that you guys will see that. But that'll be an exclusive Adepticon piece this year. So I've been enjoying, still doing work here and there for Victoria Miniatures. That's a lot of fun.
You still sculpt by hand as well as digital?
No, I haven't sculpted anything practically since we moved out here, which was in 2017.
Wow.
Yeah. The last thing that I sculpted by hand was for Panda Cult Games. It's their the Cult of Barnacle Bay board game. I did like 20 something sculpts or whatever for that. And I did that all in bees putty polymer clay. And that's the last of the practical stuff that I did. Now it's all
I can't believe it's been that long already.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Well, what's funny is going back to 2012 was I bought ZBrush with the Kickstarter money that we got from the very first Kickstarter project.
Oh, right.
And there was a guy that lived out between where I did and where Reaper was. That he ran a little company called Vision Proto, and they were a rapid prototyping company that did like medical parts, like heart valves and all kinds of stuff like that. And so I looked him up online, and I thought, well, I need to find somebody that can print this stuff out if I'm sculpting it in ZBrush. So I started sending him files, and he would print out little pieces. I did Maley's wrench for the first Kickstarter, and like a little rocket bike thing, and a rocket pack. And I took those parts out there, and he printed them, and then I picked them up and went straight to Reaper with them. And I said, hey, can you guys put these on mold for me and see if they'll, if you can cast them? And they were like, okay, well, we'll give it a try. And they came out, and I got castings of the wrenches and all of that stuff. And it's like, okay, well, this is going to work. And so I told them about where I had gotten them printed and everything. And then they started getting printed there. And then Privateer Press started getting stuff printed there.
That's where we did the Mercs guns there too.
Yeah. So I would pick up a batch of stuff, and he would have more and more prints from like all of these different miniatures companies. Like every time that I would go there, it would be somebody else like, oh, hey, check out what I've got over here. I was like, oh my gosh. Okay. So word's getting out that, this is a thing. And so I kind of relied on that, but I was still trying to do so much practical sculpting to pay the bills that I never had the time that I needed to transition completely over to digital until, we had come out here and built the shop and done all of that.
Do you find with the speed you get with digital now, you find that you're able to indulge yourself a little bit more in your figures, in your own figure choices?
Yeah, it's better all around. It's faster. Like, because I think digitally now. Used to before I was thinking practically, there's a process to that. So every time that I would look at a figure or look at a piece of art that I would need to break down, I would break it down a certain way. Well, now thinking digitally, it's like, well, if I look at a piece of art or I think of an idea, it's like, well, it's faster. Like I can come up with all of the shortcuts that I need to do to get the thing that I need. Plus, I can go back and fix stuff digitally that I couldn't do before. Plus, then you get all the things like symmetry and hard surface modeling and all of that type of stuff that's just going to give you.
Do you remember those days when you built it and then realized that your mannequin was wrong? That
you were very much tied to the armature.
You've got to strip all the putty
off. Well, here's the thing. I got contacted from. Maybe I shouldn't tell the story, but I'm gonna. Because I've had a couple of margaritas, so
it's only us three. It's fine.
But what was the Battle Systems over in the UK that does like the Core Space game?
Mm-hmm.
They contacted me to sculpt their first batch of figures for their Core Space Kickstarter project. Well, I sculpted like 18 figures, 16 or 18 figures, and I sculpted them all the wrong size. And I didn't think to measure all of that stuff. I was like, oh, I'm just going to sculpt these like a miniature. So I boxed them up. I shipped them over to the UK, and they opened them up. Oh boy, they're going to be, the figures. And it's like, no, these are way too small for like what I'm doing. I was like, okay, great. So none of those went into production, and they had to actually hire another. I think David Whitaker is the guy that sculpted all of those for him now, and they're amazing looking. They look so cool. I was like, I wish I had sculpted that because you're really neat. So, but that's a problem that you don't have with digital stuff. It's like because. Even like with Victoria's things that I'm sculpting now, she'll come back and it's like, well, I printed this and this thing's either too big or too small. And then you go in and you adjust it 10% and then print out another one. So
I think the biggest thing that I've enjoyed about it is just not having to worry about the scale of what you do. Because the scale's immaterial now. You want to make a giant, it's as easy as making a and there's no difference. Because you're not restricted by the size of the armature and how much putty you've got to work and all that kind of stuff. So you can be much more adventurous.
Right.
Well.
Yeah, and a lot. It's very freeing to like. Well, it's not like I'm going to mess a thing up because I can just go back and reform it or build another one, and you don't have to cut stuff off. Yeah. The other thing that's interesting about that is like
you can reuse stuff a lot. You can reuse stuff.
Oh yeah. Like I've got a whole library,
which is a great thing to have.
Yeah, like hands, fists in different things, holding different things, and it's like, well, I can just go and grab that, tweak it a little bit, and then it's ready to go. So that's another big time saver. And people, like traditionalists will complain that it's like, well, that you're not sculpting that and you're cheating and doing whatnot, and it's like, well, look.
All these people that don't sculpt.
You're right. If you look back at like regiments and stuff, I mean, even Games Workshop recycled some of that stuff because like there's 2 Eldar guys, and then they there's 2 striking scorpions, and then they went back and like, well, we're going to tweak this and
change the arm, change the head,
different. But change the head, change the pose of the the sword or something, and it's like, okay, it's a conversion. So to me, it's the same thing. It's like, look, if I'm going to go grab a pouch, from another digital model and put it on this one, it's like I had cast it, as like a dolly or whatever and stuck it on there, even if I was working practically.
The same goes with photography. You get people complaining that, digital's cheating and it's not, you can Photoshop everything. And they don't realize that, when people did it all on prints, that you would dodge and burn as you
different tools.
As you did the print. It's exactly the same.
Yeah, that's where all of those terms in Photoshop came from, was from the darkroom.
Exactly. Yeah.
This episode of the Sculptors is brought to you by ZBrush and Photoshop and all things digital. Throw your tools away. Throw your putty away. You're wasting your life. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. We have all transitioned to digital. I still do a little bit of traditional. Usually it's for conversions and stuff for my own personal use and whatnot. But this is a great topic. And I can't, it doesn't matter. We don't have to cut it off. But this is a great topic to talk about another time, because I know we all have, there's a lot of great things to share and teach about the ways that we go about using these tools to your benefit, so you can get miniature sculpted. So, but anyways, I could tell I had to jump in there because we're actually a little over an hour now, and I know we could go on for probably another hour on this topic, which means it'll be a great topic. So let's save it for then.
That's right.
So thanks for coming on again tonight, guys. Doing this again. I'm so glad we were able to do this,
Good fun.
and all of you
I
out there
love talking
watching.
about this stuff.
Yeah, we're all very excited to share more. So we will see you next time. We're going to try and do these once a month for now and see how they go. Next time we'll be discussing a specific topic on sculpting and or working in the miniatures industry. So, but until then, I'm Tom Mason.
I'm Bill Thornhill.
And I'm Patrick Keith, the Sculpt Dude.
And together we are the Sculptsters.
The Sculptsters!
All right, we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.